In this video, I'm going to break down the mobility and the stretching routine I do at the start of every training session. Every time I train, I do this for 10 minutes. And your flexibility is probably the most underused, undertrained, and not developed aspect of training and fighting. Your flexibility affects everything. It affects your speed, affects your power, affects your accuracy, your precision, affects your movement. You are going to get tapped a lot easier if you're not flexible, if you don't have the full range of movement that you can go through. If somebody's doing a Kimura on you or an armbar, you are going to get tapped a lot sooner than if you can actually move and have that flexibility and that mobility to be in the very awkward positions and not get tapped. It also affects your striking. You can't kick as high, you can't kick as fast, so it affects your speed. You can't put all the full power behind your punches and behind your kicks because you are stiff. So it trickles down to every aspect of your training and fighting. You have to stretch and you have to work on your mobility. And that's something that nobody wants to do. Nobody wants to spend the time to develop it. Nobody wants to spend the time to maintain it. And then they just want to come in, start lifting weights, start hitting the bag, start sparring, start rolling. Basically, they just want to skip the essential part that's going to make everything else better for you. So in this video, I wanted to break down the full session that I do every single time. I spend 10 minutes before every single training session and I go through my mobility routine and my stretching routine, and I'm going to show you what it is. Now, there are two parts to stretches and your mobility, and working on it and developing to a high level that you can actually start utilizing it to improve every aspect of fighting. The first one is developing. The second one is maintaining. The developing part is what takes the longest time. The maintaining part is simple. It's a very short period of time that you just have to keep doing over and over again so you can kind of put the stretches out there and keep moving and keep yourself flexible. But the development part, that's what takes the longest, and nobody wants to actually spend the time doing it. The development part, you often have to spend anywhere between 30 to 60 minutes of developing your flexibility. So you have to hold positions for a long period of time, anywhere between 3 to 5 minutes, and make sure that you stretch out those muscles and ligaments and tendons so they can maintain those positions, those awkward, flexible, and full mobility positions. So the development part of your flexibility, you have to dedicate that amount of time every other day, maybe. If you can spend every single day, 4 to 5 times per week, that's even better. That's going to develop it much faster for you. But you have to put in the time to develop that first. The longer you wait, the longer it's going to take and the more time you're going to have to spend. But you can still develop it. You just have to put in the time. Now, the development part is a large chunk of your time at first. But the more you start doing it, the more flexible you become, then you kind of begin to enter into maintaining part. The maintenance of this is a lot quicker. So this is why I only now spend 10 minutes before every training session to maintain. I can still do a split, I can still kick high to the head, I can still move fast, I can still do, I can be in very awkward positions and not feel like, something's gonna snap or break. So I still maintain my flexibility, but it's a lot quicker, it's a lot faster to maintain it. Just 10 minutes for me. So I still am able to do all the things that I was able to do years, decades ago, because I've put in that time early on and I continue to maintain it. So the development part, you have to develop it, and then after a few years, once you kind of begin to have the good flexibility and the stretching, it's a lot easier to maintain. So in this 10-minute video, I'm going to not fast forward anything, and I'm going to do a voiceover so that way you can see all parts and how I go through my mobility routine. Now, this is only 10 minutes. This is all I spent, but you can stretch that out and kind of look at what I'm doing, take each of those positions and do it longer. Do it for 30 seconds, do it for a minute, do it up to 3 to 5 minutes, and just hold in different positions. So you can take this and you can stretch that out to a longer time frame. So with that, here is the full 10-minute mobility and stretching routine I do at the start of every training session.
I begin by priming my entire body and getting the blood flow. So I start off by jumping around in the boxer shuffle in order to get my body ready and to get that blood flow, that initial blood flow that you need so your muscles can begin to get their full range of motion going as you stretch and as you do your mobility work. So I kind of jump around for maybe 30 to 60 seconds, switching between stances from orthodox to southpaw, and just getting ready, priming myself, my mind, and my body for what's to come. So I begin my stretching from top to bottom, from my neck to shoulders, to chest, to torso, to hips, all the way down. And I oscillate between two different movements. Dynamic stretching, where I just move my hands back and forth, move my feet, move my hips, move my entire body, more of a like a ballistic dynamic movement, combined with more of a static hold where I stretch the muscles out for maybe 10 to 20 seconds. Like I mentioned before, when you are just starting out, you'll have to hold those positions, those static holds, a lot longer, anywhere between 3 to 5 minutes. So once I get the initial blood flow and I begin to feel a little loose, I begin from the neck, stretch my neck out, and then go to my shoulders. This is where I begin to be a little bit more deliberate with static holds. And you can still see me doing a little bit more ballistic movement as well, more dynamic, to kind of continue to get that blood flow and to be more primed for my main session routine, where there's going to be a lot of dynamic movement, punching, kicking, a lot of explosiveness. So I stretch out my shoulders, my chest, and my torso, doing a lot of rotation movement, leaning back, and then I begin to lean forward and kind of begin to work my quads and my hamstrings. And there's a lot of rotation that I'm trying to implement of my upper body as I'm holding and stretching out my legs. Kind of like almost some yoga positions where you are stretching one part but you're twisting and holding another. And that really helps to open up and stretch out different parts of your body at the same time. Lower body, upper body, your torso is working, your hamstrings are stretching out, your quads, as well as your shoulders. This is a great stretch to do that will help improve your ability to kick high. It stretches out your hips, your hamstrings, your calves, your quads. And this is another great movement I introduced early on in the stretching mobility session. Putting your legs out wide apart and then leaning forward and then going from one leg to another. Really stretching your hamstrings and your quads and your torso out. At this point, I am beginning to feel more loose and more stretched out. So kind of go away from static holds and static positions and go back to dynamic ballistic movement. Just kind of start kicking high, getting that full range of motion and getting that blood flow back, getting my heart rate slightly higher. And then I go back into more of static holds. So one of the best exercises I like to do for the neck and the back stretching is lying back down on your back and then just bringing your legs over your head and touching the floor. And I just kind of rotate back and forth. So the torso is getting stretched out and I'm really feeling it in my neck. And this stretch for me personally really opens up and gets the full range of my neck going. I had a lot of neck problems through the years of wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and just getting punched in the head all the time. So for me, doing this stretch really helps me out and just releases all that pressure. So up to this point, about 4 to 5 minutes in, it was a combination of dynamic stretching, getting the blood flow going, and kind of stretching your entire body from top to bottom, getting the shoulders loose, getting the torso, stretching your chest, a little bit of quads and hamstrings, and your hips opened up. And I am beginning to slow things down. I am now going to be working more on my hips, my hamstrings, my calves, and my quads, and getting them stretched out as much as possible. One of the favorite stretches I like to do is putting your feet together, getting them close to you as possible, then leaning forward trying to touch your toes, while with your elbows you're pushing your knees down. That really opens up your hips and improves your ability to kick high, as well as do some of the more difficult rubber guard positions. Then I put one of my legs out and I bring the opposite leg next to my inner thigh and I begin to lean forward. That really stretches your hamstring and your calves. And again, here I'm only maybe holding it for about 10 seconds and sometimes longer if I'm feeling more tight and I really need to stretch those areas out. And in your case, you might have to do it for a bit longer to develop the flexibility in those areas. Here's another great stretch for your hips to improve your kicking ability and your jiu-jitsu rubber guard positions. You essentially put one of your feet in front of you, bending at the knee, and you take the opposite foot and put it in the back, also bent at the knee. So it's almost like a zigzag or a Z position, going from your foot to your thigh to the other knee to the foot. And then you lean forward and hold that position. And then you can modify that position, making the back foot straight while you still hold the front foot bent at the knee. In this next position, I bring one of the feet forward at 90 degrees and then I put the back foot straight out and now lean forward, going into next to my thigh, lowering my body as much as possible. And then I modify that by bringing the back knee to the floor and then raising my lower foot at the calf and then just pulling it back. And that really stretches your hips, your quads, and your inner hip thigh on the front leg. So you're essentially getting extreme range of movement in your entire lower body. And this position also helps to stretch out your upper body, your torso, because you're leaning with your opposite hand around and you pull it at the toe. So you're stretching your upper body muscles from your hip that are connected down to your quads. And then I continue to hold that similar position by letting my foot down to the floor while maintaining the 90 degrees in my front foot. And I stretch out more of my hip by elevating my body straight and just reaching up. And that really stretches your entire upper body down to your lower body. And you really feel it in your hip when you do this. And then there are a couple of yoga positions that I really like that work your full range of movement. You essentially keep that similar position with your front foot at 90 degrees and your back foot all the way out on your toe. And then you put your opposite hand to your foot down on the floor. Then you rotate and you reach up with your opposite hand. And here I am applying pressure to my calf by keeping the heel down to the floor and keeping my legs straight. And that really puts a good stretch on your calves. And then I do another stretch where I kind of remain in a push-up position on my toes by putting my body up in an arch position looking up to the sky. Then I get back to my feet, keep my feet together, and I lean forward, trying to touch my head to my knees while keeping my legs straight. Kind of like an old Bruce Lee stretch that he would used to do. And at this point, I am now extremely stretched out in my hips, in my quads, in my hamstrings, my calves. And I just want to get back up and jumping around, get a little bit more dynamic movement, get that blood flow going a little bit more because I've been just kind of holding positions. But at this point, I'm feeling extremely loose and relaxed. And I do my last shoulder flexibility work by going up on the pull-up bar, rotating, and just stretching out that full range of motion for my shoulders. And then I just kind of hang from the top bar and just letting my entire body stretch out. At this point, I have maybe 2 minutes left, and I finish everything off by doing some more difficult stretches. The first one is I learned from Eddie Bravo, and it helps your rubber guard and stretch out your hips more. So essentially, you just lay it back down on the floor on your back, take one of your feet and put it on top of the knee, and then you try to pull and get close to your foot as much as possible, really opening up and stretching more of the hip. And then I finish up with working on the full split. So here my hips and my quads, my hams, my calves are all nice and relaxed. And I go into the full split or as much as possible and hold that position. First I kind of go into the split and I just move forward and back with my hips, trying to go as low as possible, really pushing to get less distance down to the floor, and then I do a few push-ups. And then I sit back down with my legs the widest I can get them, and I lean forward and I hold that position a lot longer because I really want to open up those hips and work the full split. Really trying to breathe. And this is the important part I want to mention. Make sure that you breathe through your movement when you're stretching out, when you're doing your static stretches. Nice deep breaths, and as you breathe out, you go lower and deeper into the stretch. And then I make sure that I hit both sides of the leg. So from the middle, from the center, I go to one leg, hold that stretch, and I switch to the other and also hold that stretch. And I also hit the front split. So you have your side splits, which are these splits right here. And then I hit a few static holds on the front splits. And I do that for both sides. And as I do them, I'll lean forward to my front leg, getting the full stretch possible. And at this point, I am now done with my stretch and mobility routine. I am stretched out and I'm ready for my main session. And last, I want to show you a bonus stretch routine that I do that I did not include in the main session you just watched. This was inspired by Bloodsport and Kickboxer. So you essentially take rope, tie it around so you can put your foot through it, throw it around the pull-up bar, and then pull the rope with your foot in it, and then hold in that position, stretching yourself out. Do one where you hold your foot straight as if you were throwing a front kick, but of course trying to pull the rope as high as possible and leaning forward to touching your leg. And then you also do one for the side. So one kind of simulates the front split, and the one we do from the side simulates the side split. And both of these will help to get more flexibility on your front kicks and your roundhouse kicks.